A dim light flickered from a crack in the high, vaulted ceiling, barely illuminating the cold, metallic cell where Cain Voss sat, bound and bruised. Heavy quantum restraints encased his wrists and ankles, pulsing with dull red energy, shackles engineered to suppress any biological or technological enhancements. The floor beneath him hummed faintly, the resonance of unseen machinery coursing through the Zeltar fortress. He exhaled slowly, muscles tensing against the unyielding bonds. Footsteps echoed beyond the cell's reinforced door. A moment later, the translucent barrier shimmered out of existence, allowing a tall, armored figure to step inside. Lord Varzel, High Warden of the Zeltar Dominion, regarded Cain with a sneer. His exoskeletal armor gleamed, a living metal that shifted with his movements. Twin, slitted eyes glowed an eerie violet, peering down at his captive like an entomologist studying an insect pinned to a board. "You persist in defiance, human," Varzel mused, his voice a calculated blend of curiosity and condescension. He took a step closer, boots clicking against the polished obsidian floor. "Your kind is remarkable in its stubbornness, but even the most tenacious creatures break under prolonged suffering. I wonder, how much longer will you hold on?" Cain lifted his head, jaw tightening. His face bore the marks of days, maybe weeks of torture. A gash above his brow, bruises fading to sickly yellow along his ribs, dried blood staining the collar of his tattered combat uniform. But his eyes burned with an intensity that had not waned. "Is that what you tell yourself, Varzel?" His voice was hoarse but steady. "That I'll break? That I'll kneel? You must be getting desperate if you're here, personally delivering your recycled speeches." Varzel exhaled, in something akin to amusement. "Desperation? Hardly. Your species is but a fleeting irritation, a stain on the fabric of the Dominion's perfection." He crouched, leveling his gaze with Cain's. "Yet, I'll admit there is something unusual about you. The records state that human physiology is unremarkable, and yet you resisted our methods beyond logical expectation. Why is that?" Cain smirked despite the pain it caused. "Maybe your records are outdated." The warden's expression hardened. He rose to his full height and clasped his clawed hands behind his back. "Then let us update them." At his command, the ceiling flickered, revealing an array of intricate conduits woven into the architecture. The air shimmered as the cell's dampening field intensified. The quantum shackles tightened, their glow pulsating in sync with the unseen force pressing against Cain's body. A sharp, tearing pain spread through his chest, his nerves igniting as though molten metal coursed through his veins. His breathing grew ragged, yet he clenched his jaw, refusing to give the satisfaction of a scream. The Dominion had interrogators who could flay a man's mind, strip away the layers of self until nothing remained but compliance. Cain had seen comrades crumble under such methods. He had vowed never to do the same. Varzel watched, his expression unreadable. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Your body resists even this." It's as if he paused, tilting his head slightly, as if something inside you refuses to yield. Cain forced a laugh, though it came out strained. "Or maybe your machines aren't as advanced as you think." The warden's gaze darkened. He turned sharply and strode toward the exit. A regrettable waste of potential. But no matter. Your execution is scheduled for the next cycle. The Dominion will broadcast it across every occupied system as a warning to your kind. The barrier reactivated with a soft hum as Varzel departed, leaving Cain alone once more. Silence settled over the chamber, punctuated only by the faint, rhythmic throbbing of the quantum restraints. He closed his eyes, inhaled, then exhaled slowly. Something inside him stirred. It had been there for days, weeks, maybe, but now it was impossible to ignore. A pulse, a whisper in his blood. It did not belong to the Dominion, nor to their technology. It was his. Something deep. Something waking up. Kane shifted, flexing his fingers. The restraints tightened automatically, their sensors detecting movement, but this time he felt them, not as unbreakable constructs of alien engineering, but as something lesser, something fragile. A slow grin formed on his lips, despite the pain lacing his every breath. They thought they had chained him. They had only made him stronger. The march to execution was a ceremonial act, a spectacle meant to solidify the Dominion's dominance. The Zeltar fortress had been built for intimidation. Its vaulted corridors loomed high above, sleek and seamless, with shifting walls that pulsed with cold, artificial light. Kane Voss walked its length with chains wrapped tight around his wrists and ankles, his movements dictated by the sharp tugs of the Zeltar honor guard leading him forward. The guards, clad in shimmering biosynthetic armor, kept their plasma rifles primed, wary of their prisoner despite the quantum restraints still glowing against his skin. Beyond the colossal gateway ahead, the execution chamber awaited. An arena of sorts, its translucent dome designed for an unobstructed view of the spectacle from the tiered platforms above. Already, hundreds of Zeltar elites gathered to witness the event, their elongated forms draped in ceremonial robes. Murmurs of amusement and disdain rippled through the crowd as Kane was dragged forward. At the far end of the chamber, Lord Varzel stood upon an elevated dais, flanked by high-ranking Dominion officials. His violet eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Step forward, human. Kane did, but only because the guards forced him to. His body ached from the weeks of captivity, but beneath the exhaustion, something simmered. A presence, deeper than thought, heavier than instinct. It coiled beneath his ribs like a waiting storm. Before the assembled might of the Dominion, Varzel continued, his voice reverberating through the chamber, we bring this war to its inevitable conclusion. Humanity's defiance ends here, in this moment, for all to witness. A pristine executioner's blade, a towering construct of pure energy, descended from the ceiling, its edge thrumming with barely contained plasma. It was a weapon designed for swift annihilation, capable of severing molecular bonds in an instant. No body, no remains, just erasure. The guards wrenched Kane's arms forward, forcing him into position. The energy blade ignited with a low hum. Then it happened. A pulse, deep and raw, rippled through Kane's core. The restraints on his wrist flickered, their red glow distorting. His heartbeat slammed against his ribs, faster, harder, his veins alight with something electric. The world sharpened. The murmurs of the crowd, the whine of the executioner's blade, the breathing of the guards. It all became crystal clear, every detail illuminated with impossible clarity. A faint crack echoed. The crowd hushed. The chains around his wrists trembled. Lord Varzel narrowed his eyes. What is this? Kane exhaled, slow and steady, and the chains shattered. The explosion of energy that followed was unlike anything the Zeltar had ever seen. The force sent the guards hurtling backward, their armor splintering as if struck by an unseen shockwave. Kane staggered forward, his arms free, golden light arcing across his skin like living lightning. He felt it now, the thing that had been lurking beneath his skin. Not technology, not mutation, something deeper. The quantum restraints on his ankles snapped apart as he stepped forward, his hands curling into fists. A ripple of unease passed through the gathered Zeltar. The Dominion had conquered dozens of species. They had studied human physiology, mapped every biological and neurological threshold. And yet this was not in their data. Varzel raised a hand. Kill him. The honor guard reacted instantly, rifles snapping into firing position. Bolts of white-hot plasma screamed through the air toward Kane's chest. He moved without thinking. Too fast, his body shifting between the bolts like liquid shadow. One guard lunged at him, blade raised. Kane's hand lashed out, and the blade met his bare palm. The weapon shattered. A collective gasp echoed through the arena. The honored guard hesitated. Kane lifted his hand, watching the golden energy dance along his fingertips, feeling the raw potential surging beneath his skin. This power, it wasn't new. It had always been there, waiting, buried beneath layers of restraint and control. The Dominion's chains had not silenced it. They had only made it stronger. His gaze lifted to Varzel. The warden's expression remained composed, but something flickered behind his eyes. A calculation, an adjustment of probability. Kane took a step forward. "You're afraid?" Varzel's fingers twitched at his side. "Contain him. Now." The chamber itself responded. The walls flared with alien glyphs, channeling unseen energies. Kane felt it press against him, an artificial force trying to suppress whatever he had become. His knees buckled for a fraction of a second, his vision darkening at the edges. No. His eyes snapped open, and something shattered inside him. The force weighing him down imploded, the glyphs along the walls fracturing in a cascade of broken light. The Dominion had prepared for every known anomaly, but they had never accounted for this. Kane clenched his fists. The chains were gone. The power was his. Varzel stepped backward, and for the first time, his confidence wavered. "Deploy the seal." Kane's breath slowed. The seal, he didn't know what it was, but it didn't matter. The Dominion had built it under the assumption that he was still bound. They had no idea what was coming next. He didn't either, but he was about to find out. The execution chamber trembled. Overhead, the alien glyphs still flickered, their meaning lost in the haze of broken energy. Kane Voss stood at the center of it all, golden arcs of power pulsing across his skin, raw and untamed. The seal, the word had rolled off Varzel's tongue with weight, a finality that suggested it was no ordinary failsafe. Kane had no idea what the Dominion had built to contain him, but he was about to find out. A deep, mechanical hum filled the chamber. The walls shifted, their sleek surfaces peeling apart as massive conduits emerged, pulsing with dark energy. Overhead, the ceiling split open, revealing an intricate construct descending into place, a monolithic structure of obsidian metal, engraved with swirling patterns of shifting light. The very air around it warped, bending under its impossible gravity. Kane felt it immediately, a force, primal and suffocating, pressing against him like a mountain of unseen hands. His power, once an untamed inferno, wavered. The golden arcs flickered, his muscles tightening under the crushing weight. Varzel's voice rang out, confident once more. "You believe yourself unshackled human, but you have merely exchanged one set of chains for another." Kane gritted his teeth. His body screamed in protest, but he forced himself upright. No, not again. A sharp crack split the air as the seal activated. The swirling patterns along its surface ignited with a blinding violet light, and suddenly, the world collapsed inward. A gravitational vortex erupted, dragging everything toward the seal's center. The honor guard closest to it vanished instantly, their forms crushed into nothingness before they could even scream. The Zeltar nobles scrambled back, their composure shattering as the force threatened to pull them into oblivion. And Kane, he was caught in it. The pull was merciless, dragging him forward inch by inch. His boots scraped against the ground, sparks flying as he fought for stability. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to resist, but the pressure only increased, like 1,000 invisible chains binding him once more. Varzel watched with satisfaction. Your body is powerful, but even you cannot resist a force that bends the very fabric of existence. The seal will strip you bare of power, of thought, of will. You will be undone at the fundamental level. Kane barely heard him. The gravity tripled, then quadrupled. His knees buckled, his vision blurred. The golden energy flickered dangerously low. This was different. This was unlike the chains, unlike the quantum restraints. The seal was not a cage. It was a devourer. It was designed to erase whatever it was meant to hold. His fingers curled into fists, trembling under the immense strain. He had fought all his life, against enemies, against fate, against the ceaseless pull of control. He had sworn, time and time again, that no one would ever bind him again. And yet here he was, bound once more. No! A spark, small at first, then a flicker, then a roar. Something ancient within him snapped, and suddenly, the pull of the seal was not enough. His power did not just return. It exploded. A shock wave of blinding golden energy burst from his core, shattering the gravitational pull in an instant. The conduits lining the walls ruptured, their glowing filaments imploding as they failed to contain the surge. The vortex collapsed inward, then detonated outward, hurling debris across the chamber. Kane stood in the wreckage unmoved. His body no longer resisted the seal. It defied it. Varzel took an instinctive step back. Impossible. Kane lifted his gaze, his eyes glowing like molten gold. You try to take my power. He clenched his fists and the air around him warped. Now watch me take yours. The Dominion had thrown everything at him. The quantum chains, the executioner's blade, the seal itself. But Kane was beyond them now, and the war was far from over. The chamber lay in ruin. The seal, the Dominion's final failsafe, was nothing more than a smoldering crater where its immense power had collapsed in on itself. Shattered conduits and molten fragments of alien technology littered the floor, glowing with residual energy. The air still crackled with golden static, the remnants of Kane's unleashed power. He stood in the center of it all, his breathing steady, his body no longer straining against unseen forces. He was free. The gathered Zeltar nobles remained frozen in their seats. Their elongated faces, usually sculpted in detached superiority, were etched with fear. They had witnessed countless executions, had seen entire species brought to their knees under the Dominion's might. But never had they seen this. A prisoner, a human, standing untouched where their greatest weapon had failed. At the far end of the ruined dais, Lord Varzel had not moved. His violet eyes flickered with something beyond fear, calculation. He was already considering contingencies, already running the variables in his mind, searching for an angle where this could still be salvaged. You think you've won, Varzel said at last, his voice measured, masking the instability beneath. But you are alone. The Dominion spans galaxies. You are a single man. Kane stepped forward. The air rippled around him, golden arcs dancing along his skin. His movements were effortless now, no longer hindered by weight or resistance. He was beyond that. I was alone, Kane admitted, his voice quiet but unwavering. But you made a mistake, Varzel. The warden's fingers twitched at his sides. And what mistake was that? Kane's golden eyes burned. You let them watch. A murmur swept through the gathered Zeltar elites. They understood his meaning, even before the truth settled in. The execution chamber's broadcast systems had been active the entire time. The Dominion had intended to show the public humanity's final defeat, but instead, they had given them something else entirely. A human breaking their chains. A human shattering their strongest weapon. A human defying them. The Dominion had ruled through order, through the belief that their power was absolute. But now, across 1,000 star systems, beings who had only ever seen submission had witnessed rebellion. And rebellions had a way of spreading. Varzel knew it too. His facade of control cracked, his exoskeletal fingers curling into fists. This does not end here. Kane took another step forward. No, it doesn't. A sharp hum filled the chamber as Dominion reinforcements arrived. Dozens of heavily armored Praetorian enforcers, their rifles locking onto him. The Zeltar may have feared him, but they were not yet ready to concede. Not yet. Kane exhaled. His hands curled into fists. The golden light around him flared, the ground beneath his feet splintering as raw power surged outward. For the first time in his life, he felt no resistance. No shackles, no weight, no limitations. They thought he had been dangerous before. They had no idea what he was now. The first shot was fired, and Kane moved.